Welcome to this Women in Science Masterclass, and I'm going to be talking about pathways to success in science and beyond. First, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a professor in the Department of Cognitive Science here at Macquarie University, and I'll tell you what cognitive science means a little bit later. I'm a psychological scientist, so my background is in psychology. I have an honours degree in psychology and a PhD in psychology, and again, I'll tell you what that means as we go through. So I work at the university and I'm an academic, so I'll explain that, but I do research on some pretty interesting topics, and I'll tell you about my research. I do research on hypnosis and I do research on memory, and I also do some teaching, and I do what we call service, and I'm going to explain all those ideas a bit later. Also importantly for today, I'm a wife and I'm a mother of 2 primary school kids, because one of the important jobs that we have as scientists is to sort of work out that balance between doing our research, being a scientist, and also having a nice life. So I'll talk about that towards the end. So let me start by telling you, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal journey through science. So I'll tell you about what it was like for me growing up and the choices that I made. So I'm one of 5 kids. I'm the middle kid. You can see the picture of me and my brothers and sisters in our attractive outfits in the 1970s. I'm the middle kid. I've got an older brother and sister and a couple of younger brothers. And I grew up out in a sort of semi-rural area, out at the base of the Blue Mountains in a place called the Hawkesbury Valley. My mum and dad didn't go to university. In fact, very few, if any, of my family members before me had ever gone to university. My dad was a butcher, my mum was a barmaid, so we came from a not very wealthy family, but we spent a lot of time sort of out in the world. So I spent a lot of time, my brothers and sisters and I, we'd run around with all different kind of weird ideas. We'd build things to sort of float on the dam, or we'd build cubby houses, we'd look after the animals. We'd be out and about pretty much all the time, and that really influenced the kind of things that I was interested in as I thought more about science. The other thing I spent a lot of time doing is reading. I always had my nose in a book, and although my family didn't have much money, my mum always made sure we had enough money to let me buy a book at the sort of the school book club every month or so. So I was always reading, and for me, because we didn't have much money and we didn't get to go out and about a lot, I learned about the world by reading. And at one point my parents bought us a set of encyclopedias, because I grew up in a time well before the internet, when you couldn't just look stuff up on the internet, and so you'd have to go to the library or read encyclopedias. So I was always reading, and I just really want to emphasize that reading is a really important thing, a way to learn about the world. And I'm not sure if you've had a chance to study this book in school. It's a wonderful book by science fiction writer Ray Bradbury, who's an American writer, and he wrote a really well-known book called Fahrenheit 451. And this book is all about a government of the future that sort of controls what everybody knows. It controls the people by controlling their information. So they believe that, if people have access to too much information, then they'll kind of get out of control. And that the way they control people is by burning all the books. So Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature at which paper burns. So at one point, one of the characters describes to the protagonist, Montag, he says the following thing, which I think is really neat. He says, "Most of us can't rush around talking to everyone, know all the cities of the world. We haven't time, money, or that many friends. The things that you're looking for are in the world, but the only way the average chap will ever see 99% of them is in a book." And that was kind of what life was like for me growing up. Learning about the world, thinking about what I might be when I grow up, was all about reading in books. So I went to school, obviously. I went to pretty much no special sorts of schools or fancy schools. I just went to my local high schools. I went to 3 different schools because my family moved around a little bit. I certainly wouldn't have called myself a cool kind of a person back then. I was more a quirky kind, but it's funny when you look back on yourself at school and you think, what do you mean by cool and what's cool now? And I knew about myself that when I really loved a subject, I worked harder at it. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, that you're going to do lots of different subjects while you're at school, and they might not all be something that you feel completely passionate about, But that's completely fine. You'll find the thing that you love and that you're passionate about, and you'll really get into it. So I think it's tricky when people come to university to study something and they come perhaps because someone's told them they should do it, or because they got a particular mark and you don't want to waste the marks. You need to come and do something that you love, and because university and life is really hard work. So you want to be doing something that you go home every night thinking, this is awesome, I'm loving what I'm learning about. The other thing I felt at school, and I'm not sure if any of you have had this experience, is I felt a lot of pressure not to be too smart. I have a really clear memory of being hit on the head by a boy in my class because I got a higher mark than him in a maths class. I got one of the highest marks. And so at one of the schools I went to, it wasn't cool for girls to be smart. And this is something that I hope that you completely reject. Girls can be smart, and they are smart, and they should be smart, and you shouldn't be afraid to talk about what you're interested in. There's research that suggests that over time, certain environments can make it so that girls talk less and contribute less because they're feeling that external pressure. If you're feeling those kinds of things, if you're worried that others are feeling those kind of things, I'd really encourage you to read things like Amy Poehler's Smart Girls. You might know Amy Poehler from Saturday Night Live or Parks and Recreation. She's a really funny comedian. Or Sheryl Sandberg. She's the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, and she's got a program called the Lean In program. So it's really important for us, girls and women, to know that we've got a voice and we've got a chance to get out there and say something. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be all different kinds of things. Originally, I called this talk, I Want to Be a Donkey, because my daughter had told me quite recently that when she grew up, she wanted to be a donkey. Sometimes she wants to be a dolphin, but mostly she wants to be a vet, or she wants to be a zoologist. She wants to work with animals, and that's some pictures of her when we were in Africa, and she's spotting cheetahs. So she loves animals, and that's what she wants to be. When I was growing up, at first I really wanted to be a medical doctor, because when I was little I'd spent time in hospitals, so I really wanted to be a doctor. And I'm not sure why I changed my mind about that. I think maybe when I first saw blood, I decided, yeah, maybe not for me. At one point I wanted to be a teacher, but by the time I left high school I was really keen to be a journalist. And the reason was that I was completely inspired by this very famous Australian journalist named Jana Wendt, who, when I was growing up, she was one of the most influential women journalists in the country, and used to do these amazing interviews where she'd kind of steamroll over all these very powerful world leaders. She was an amazing journalist. So I wanted to be just like Jana. So when I left school, so I had a chance to do work experience, and hopefully you get a chance to do that as well. So I went out to a primary school to try and be a teacher, and I went and worked on the Land newspaper to be a journalist as well. But the important thing to know is that you're not going to find out everything there is to know about a career, and sometimes you kind of just have to wait and see what jobs are going to be like. But if you can do whatever you can do to close that knowledge gap between what you think a career is like and what it is actually like, by talking to people in the profession, by reading things, by going to workplaces if you have a chance. But I also want to really encourage you to think that it's okay to wait and work it out as you go along. And I'm going to come back to that theme again and again, that it's okay not to know exactly right now or by the end of school what you want to do, that you can work it out as you go along and it's going to be fine. So I'm not sure what kind of subjects you're studying at the moment, but here are some of the subjects that I studied, and assuming that I remembered them all. So up to the time that I was in year 10, I did all of the kind of standard sort of subjects, and I pretty much liked them all, and I did reasonably well in all of them except art. I liked art, but I was terrible at it. I loved English, and that's why I've put it in red. I really loved English, and I did well in that. And maths I did well in as well. But when I went to high school, when I went to my HSC, I changed schools for my HSC. I decided, because I wanted to be a journalist, I thought, oh, well, I should do more English. And I didn't do as much maths, and I didn't choose science because they didn't have chemistry at the school that I went to. And I loved chemistry, and I didn't really like physics so much. So I kind of started to stream myself, making choices that were influenced by what I thought a journalist would need to know. As it turned out, it still would have been useful for me to keep doing some science and doing other things. By the time you finish high school, the things you really need to be thinking about is making sure you have literacy in both English and mathematics. These are important for university and life. And also strong writing skills and writing habits. So one of the things some students struggle with when they come to university is kind of all that writing, the writing habits, and writing clearly or communicating clearly. So if you're working on all of those kind of skills, you're doing really well. I want to point out, I've got French listed there for the HSC. I had never done any French before. I couldn't speak any French at all. And I just got it into my mind that I want to do French for my HSC. And my parents told me it was a terrible idea. But I didn't listen to them. And I think the French teacher told me it was a terrible idea as well. But to their credit, they let me make the mistakes that I probably needed to make. I hated it and I did really poorly in it. But it hasn't mattered in the long run. So again, I just want to emphasize for you that it's going to be okay to make choices that end up not being the right ones, to do things and change your mind, and it will be fine in the end. So that's what I did for my HSC. And looking back now, I don't know, 30 years or something or more, about 30 years since I left school, here are some things that I really realize about being at high school. Number one, it was really important to me that I believed that I could do anything. And my dad, who didn't finish high school, I'm not even sure he finished primary school because he went to be an apprentice butcher. He taught me, he said, you can do anything that you want to be. You just have to work really hard. And he really encouraged me in that. And he never told me that anything would stand in my way. It wasn't about, never mentioned anything, well, you're a girl, so you can only do this. He never said anything like that. He said, you can do whatever you want as long as you work hard enough. So that's from my dad. I also learned the value of a good work ethic. I think certainly as time has gone on, once I got to university, I developed an even better work ethic. But the other thing that was important is a good reading habit, because by the time you get to university, and I hope you all do get a chance to come to university, that you end up reading a lot of material. So you're reading stuff for courses. And if you love to read, and you should be reading not just for work or school, but reading for fun, reading for the love of it, reading because you're learning about the world. And my mum really encouraged me in that. Looking back now, I also realised that it's enough sometimes just to have one amazing teacher that can inspire you. And I'm pretty sure that you probably have more than just one teacher inspiring you. But I remember one teacher, my English teacher, Mr. Riley, who also told me, you know, you can do whatever you want. I see you at university. I see you being successful. And he kind of believed in me and really encouraged me. Well, there's lots of research that tells us that one great teacher can be enough to be a catalyst for people to go on to have amazing experiences. So I hope sometime you take the chance to tell your teachers thank you, because they work hard to make sure that you do well, and to be inspiring to their students. Looking back now, I also realised, as I mentioned before, that there were kind of big gaps in what I thought my dream jobs would be about, what they would be like, and what they are actually like. And as I've said, it's important to try and close that gap if you can, but it's also fine. You're going to learn about what careers are like as you go on, and change your ideas. And I think changing your ideas is fine. So that's high school. So how did then I go from high school to become a scientist? The next thing I did, obviously, is I went to university. As I mentioned to you, I wanted to be the next Jana Van. I wanted to be a great journalist. So I came to Macquarie University to study a Bachelor of Arts in Communications. And this is the degree that you needed to study to do journalism. At Macquarie University at that time, they had what's called a generalist first year. So you didn't kind of launch into all your journalism subjects. You needed to do a few things that were related to that degree. So English and linguistics, and you can see I've highlighted them in red. But you also had to do a variety of other things that I chose. Middle English, I'm not sure if you've studied any Chaucer yet, that's kind of Chaucer. Psychology, sociology, and politics. So in the first year, you just do a smorgasbord of things, and then the idea is that you go on and you specialise in communications or whatever it might be in the second year. What I experienced when I came to university is that the subjects and the kind of process of studying at university was really different to high school. So in high school, as I mentioned before, I loved English. I loved it. At university, it was a different experience. I'm not sure why. I think it was just a much faster pace, had to read a whole variety of things. In high school, and I'm not sure if this is what it's like for you now, you get to really deep dive into books or into works, plays and things like that, and really swim around in it and love it. But at university, the pace was really fast, and I found it a bit uncomfortable. So it's interesting that how things go at high school are going to be slightly different at university, and you have to be ready for that, and ready to be flexible, that it's going to be a bit different. So university is a different kind of environment, and some of the things that I've learned myself and from supervising lots and lots of students is that you have to be a person who can manage your time. You have to be an independent learner. At high school, your teachers will follow up with you if you don't turn up for class, if you're not handing in work, if you're not keeping up. At university, they don't do that. The lecturers don't care if you come to the lectures or not. They're not keeping track of people. If you don't hand in an assignment, they don't follow up with you. You just score 0 on the assignment. So you have to be a very independent learner and somebody who can manage your own progress through. And I've certainly seen students, both when I was a student and as I've become an academic, who find that a real struggle. So if you're developing those independent skills now, you're going to be really set for university. The other big lesson I kind of learned mostly from watching others is you've got to be careful not to get sidetracked by all the fun on campus. So on one of the first days you come to university, here at Macquarie, they set it up like a giant festival. So there are all different campus clubs everywhere, and they've got pillow fights going on, they've got people running around in costumes, and there's barbecues happening. So there's a lot of things that you can be focusing on apart from actually going to classes and keeping up with your work. For instance, when I came from school and I came to university, and there's a bar on campus here at Macquarie, and people can drink in the bar, and they could drink at lunchtime if they wanted to. So I certainly had some friends who would go to the bar at lunchtime, drink some alcohol, and then go to their classes a bit the worse for wear. So that wasn't really my thing, but you need to be very careful. So certainly some of the students, some of my friends and other people I've seen sort of more had a degree in the bar rather than ended up with the degree that they came to get. So balancing those things is really important. A lot of students who come to university here at Macquarie and other places also have to work. I mentioned to you I came from a not well-off family at all. So to pay my way through university, I got a job in an RSL club, so a Returned Servicemen's Leagues club, where veterans come, to have a drink and a meal and things like that, and there's poker machines. I worked every Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday night from about 5 o'clock every afternoon until 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's how I paid my way through university. So I had to work out how to balance that work, which let me pay for uni and let me pay for living, plus coming to my classes and doing all my assignments. And that's an experience for lots of people. So that's something that you can start thinking about. How will you go doing those for those of you who might have after school jobs? If you're developing those skills now, they'll hold you in good stead. So when I came to university, as I just mentioned a moment ago, I didn't enjoy English. I had to do English as part of the major for communications to become a journalist, but I didn't really like it at university, but I loved my psychology course. I mentioned just a second ago that I worked in an RSL club, and my job there was to be the change girl. So I gave money, all the coins, to the people who were coming to play the poker machines. And so people would come in and they'd come and get money from me, and then they'd go and put it in the poker machines. And so I would watch for hours and hours, week after week, month after month, and I could not understand why people kept putting money through these machines. I'm not sure if you know this, but poker machines are set up inside the machine to only ever pay back about 87% of what gets put in. So you can never, over time, make your money back, right? But sometimes people get wins, they get small wins, they get big wins, and there's something that kind of sucks them into it. And I'd watch it, and people would be really upset sometimes at the end of the night. I remember one older lady saying to me, I've just put my pension check through the machines. I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay my electricity bill. And I'd think, what is going on here? And at that time I was going to psychology classes, and psychology really helped me understand how you might think about these problems of gambling and how you might solve it. So I changed my major to psychology. Now, psychology is it's a scientific study of the mind and of behavior. You might be kind of familiar with the idea of psychology for people who are having psychological difficulties, who might be experiencing anxiety or depression or something like that. And that's one really important part of psychology. But the other important part is that we try to work out what's going on in our mind. How do we remember? How do we learn? How do we understand what's going on in the world? And so how do little kids develop? How do they know what things are? How do they come to be who they are? This is all psychology. So I wanted to change my major to psychology. Instead of doing journalism, I wanted to do psychology. But my parents, even though they let me do French back in my HSC, they're like, oh, but what are you going to become? They wanted to know what job I could get. And I guess this is an important thing to be thinking about when you're choosing university careers. They thought, oh no, maybe you could be a teacher instead. But I was adamant. I thought psychology was fascinating. So I changed my direction. So if you're not familiar with psychology, psychology is a really popular course here at university. So let me tell you about the pathway for psychology. So a career in psychology starts with a 3-year undergraduate degree. So people come from high school and then they can enroll in a 3-year undergraduate degree. And that's the box there you can see on the left. Now, even a 3-year undergraduate degree, you can use that for lots and lots of careers. The sorts of things that you understand people's, the way they think about things, the way they behave. You can understand how to measure different aspects of people. So you can use a 3-year undergraduate psychology degree in a human resources career or in market research, in lots of different kinds of ways. But if you want to become a psychologist, if you want to be a clinical practitioner, then people would go on to a 4th year in psychology. So you can follow that pink arrow to the next box, which says 4th year honours or postgraduate diploma. And that consists of some more courses, more practical courses, plus a research thesis. And on the basis of that, you can go and be registered as a psychologist with some extra supervision and training. Or you could go on and follow the pink arrow again, and you could go and do a postgraduate master's degree. Now, this is a degree where people continue on to an extra 2 years of specialization. So if they want to become a clinical psychologist or an organizational psychologist that works in companies, or a counseling psychologist or a neuropsychologist who measures what happens to people when they've had a brain injury or something like that. Alternatively, if you don't want to be a practicing psychologist, you can sort of jump over that postgraduate master's pathway and you can do a PhD in psychology. And that trains you to be a researcher, to be a scientist or an academic. So you remember that I said to you that I have an honours degree in psychology, so I have what's in the second box. And then I jumped over and I have a PhD in psychology. So many career pathways when you go to university will look like this, where you can follow along, do undergraduate training, and then start to specialise or do a research career. So scientists at university, most of them have a PhD in whatever their degree might be. So if you're thinking about, I want to be a psychologist too, that sounds fantastic, and I think I'd like to do a PhD, where could you work? Well, you can work like me in a university. You can be an academic, and I'll tell you about what an academic is in a moment. Or you could be an administrator. You can help academics to do their job, do outreach things such as Casey and others have been doing here. If you didn't want to work in a university, you could work in the private sector. You could work in different companies. You could be a part of consulting teams. You could help to develop products or services. You could be in human factors research, like how are people using my product? How can I improve that? Or perhaps you could do something like coaching, professional development coaching or life coaching. If that wasn't for you, perhaps you'd like to work in the government. The government employs, different levels of government employ PhD people as policy advisors or consultants in areas such as policing, health areas, road safety. So psychologists have been responsible, for instance, for conducting the research about how can we make sure people are wearing their seatbelts? What kinds of advertising campaigns could we use on the television or in other media to increase the likelihood people are wearing seatbelts or not driving after they've been drinking? So psychologists have had an important role to play in there. If those things weren't your cup of tea, perhaps you'd be work in the media as a science commentator, a science communicator, and I think you might have heard about science communication in the last presentation as well. So lots of different opportunities for psychologists, lots of different opportunities for researchers. But as I said, I'm an academic, and I basically do three kinds of things, and this graph shows you those three kinds of things. So in principle, about 40% of my time, the red part, is on research. So I build research teams, I gather good researchers together. Together we design and we run research projects, and I'm going to tell you about those projects in a little bit. We train new researchers, young people, to be better scientists. We write books, we write papers, and we go to conferences, either here in Australia or overseas, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. The second thing that we do is we teach, just like your wonderful teachers in your school. We do very similar things, but just here at university. So we give lectures, we stand in front of big groups and we talk about things. We might run smaller groups, tutorials or practicals where people have to do different tasks. We mark assignments, we mark exams, and we supervise people's projects. So pretty much exactly the same as your teachers do in school. The third component of our job, which is supposed to take about 20% of our time, is what we call service. So we help run the university. So we sit on committees, making decisions about things, trying to improve how the university runs. If students come and they're not happy with particular courses, they're finding it's too confusing or it's not what we want, then we would work on that to improve those. So this is the kind of service. We also contribute to the community, whether by talking to high school groups such as yourself, or going to Rotary clubs, or to talking out and about. And in the same way, we're educating people about science, maybe by writing things for the paper or talking on the radio. So most academics that I work with, we do all of these different kinds of things. A lot of people think that that when the students go on holiday at university, and university students do have quite a few holidays, I think they have more than high school students, that we're also on holiday. But just like your teachers, we're not on holidays when the students are on holidays. We're still working, doing all of these different kinds of things. But you can see we get to do lots of really interesting kinds of things. So here's just an idea of my pathway. So how long it took me to do these things. So I left high school so long ago in 1986, and I started my 4-year honours degree in psychology here at Macquarie. And I graduated 4 years later in 1991, and I started a PhD. I graduated in 1996. After that, I went over to San Francisco in the United States, and I did what's called postdoctoral training. And so it was about 10 years of study from when I left high school until I finished my PhD, and including my postdoctoral training, it was 13 years. So for lots of careers, it takes a number of years to get to the point that you want to be. After I came back from San Francisco, I worked as a research fellow at the University of New South Wales. In 2004, my son Oliver was born, and I took some time off for him. I came back to Macquarie in 2007 as an associate professor, and then in 2009 my daughter was born, and I took a whole year off because she never slept. In 2014, I was promoted to professor, which is kind of like the senior grade of an academic. So 18 years after my PhD. So been doing lots of different things over that time. So looking back on my university career, in the same way I kind of looked back at high school, I realised now that university opened my eyes to a broad world. I told you that I came from a not very well-off family, and I went to a school where there weren't many people from different kinds of backgrounds. But at university, there were people from all different places who have done all different kinds of things. I was introduced to different ideas, different political ideas, so many kinds of things. So university was a real eye-opener for me. University, as I said, also forced me to develop a really strong work ethic, especially because I had to balance paid employment and come into university. And this kind of work ethic, it just serves you well all the way through your life. I've also known now that having some passion for the career path that you're taking for your career is really crucial. Now, I chose wrongly at first. I chose to do journalism, but it didn't matter because I found the path that I wanted to when I recognized what was really interesting for me. And this might be your experience as well, that it's totally fine to take some false starts, to go down one track and to change and see what suits you. But I think it's really important to choose something that sings for you. I know some people talk about if you get a really high mark on your HSC, don't waste those marks. Go and do some particular kind of course that needs those high marks. But you're never going to waste your high marks and your hard work if you're doing something that you really care about. And you go home, especially when you've got a family and you're juggling things, if you go home and you're not loving what you're doing every day, it's really hard to keep going. So something that you're passionate about. The final thing that I can tell you now, looking back on my university career, and that I know from working here, is that independent, self-motivated, resilient students do well in general. Because as I said, university is a place where people aren't looking after you all the time in the sense of making sure you're in class or making sure you've finished things or making sure you've handed in. If you're the kind of person who can do that yourself and bounce back from that, then you're going to do really well. Okay, so let me tell you quickly about a day in my life. I work here in the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence in Cognition and its Disorders. We're a $21 million research centre where we study cognition, which is really just the mind and its disorders and how to treat them. We have 5 programs of research on memory, on belief, on language, reading and person perception. So we're trying to understand all different kinds of psychological disorders, and we work with different kinds of, we work with patients and children and do laboratory studies. I have 2 different teams, the Macquarie Hypnosis and Delusions team and the Macquarie Collective Cognition team. If we have a chance, I'll come back and tell you a bit more about that research. So we use hypnosis to recreate clinical delusions, which are false beliefs, and I'll come back to that. And we also try to work out how to improve and protect memory, especially with older people, because as older people age, they start to lose their ability to remember particular things, and we try to work out how to help them. The other thing I've done a lot of work on you might be interested in is looking at whether hypnosis can help witnesses to remember. So if you're involved in the criminal setting, a police officer might say to you, well, you need to tell me what happened. Tell me the whole truth, but nothing but the truth. Now, just think about this. Do you think that human memory works like a video recorder that records everything that we can see and review? So 63% of a lot of Americans who are in a survey believed that, but it's actually not true. They're not right. Memory isn't like a videotape recorder, and there's lots of recent cases, such as the Oscar Pistorius trial or the Adnan Syed murder case, which you can hear about on the Serial podcast that talks about this. So we've been doing a variety of research using hypnosis to see what happens to it. In amongst all that research, what do I do every day? And this kind of sketches out some of the things that I do. I drop my kids off. I come and I check what's happening. We have staff meetings or team meetings. I supervise my students. I have meetings with them about their projects. I might do some research or reading on the internet. I'm writing papers and I'm doing talks and I'm doing admin. So lots of different things while I'm sitting at my desk. But I also get to do some more unusual things every now and again, whether it's going out into the community and talking to kids. That's my daughter at school. When I might be doing some media work on the TV or the radio, or I might be doing some work with the police or the courts. I also get lots of chances to travel, and here's some of the places that I've been to for conferences, and here's some pictures from conferences in Denmark, London, That's in San Francisco. That's my son and I. We were in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. There's London again. And that we didn't have a conference at Legoland, but we went there while we were going. So as a scientist, you get lots of chances to travel around. So it's a terrific lifestyle like that. The good things about being an academic is that you get a lot of independence. It's really challenging, and you get a lot of flexibility about your time. You can kind of, work out what your day looks like. The other thing I really like is working with what I call good eggs, nice people. I think it's really important, working on important problems that I'm really passionate about. Some of the challenges is in academia, there's not much job security sometimes. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. You can be working long hours. You can almost be working all the time, so you kind of have to manage that. So let me finish with just a few points of advice for you as you start thinking your way to success in your careers. I think it's important for you to be open to the kind of people that you're becoming, as much as what you're learning every day in school. We know from research that people your age, if you start thinking about your journey through life now, that kind of thinking and reflection really helps you to be more resilient later. I want to encourage you also to be open to opportunities. Know that you can make it up as you go along. You can change directions, that will be fine, and search for the thing that you're passionate about. I want to remind you that life and work life can be a real roller coaster. And you might hear some people talk about their work and you think, wow, they're so amazing. But kind of behind their story, there's a roller coaster of times that things went well and times when things didn't go so well. And in my group, we talk about saving the snaps for later. So when something good happens to us, we kind of this sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? We kind of snap and go, yay, we're so great. And we save that up for the times when something gets knocked back or we have a failure or things aren't going so well. So we remind one another that not every day is going to be an up day. So we celebrate them when we can. The final thing is we surround yourself with good eggs. Surround yourself with people who are supportive of you and want you to succeed. And don't be distracted by naysayers, people who don't want you to succeed or who bring you down. I want to remind you that you're going to be, sometimes you might feel like you're a small fish or a big fish. When I came from school to university, there were some people at my school who were so successful. Their scores were so amazing. They just were off the charts. Then they got to university and then they realized, gee, lots of people are smart here at university. There's always someone smarter. So you just have to think there's different kinds of smart. Smartness isn't everything. And just try to control that feeling of competition, because it can be unhelpful to be always worrying about where everybody else is and how you're doing and being ultra competitive. I want people to be collegial, to be supportive and celebrating everybody. Finally, down the track, when you're starting to think about family and work, Sheryl Sandberg, again from Facebook, tells us that we should choose friends and partners and colleagues and others who support the choices that we make, who are, don't say, no, women should be at home, they shouldn't be working, they should be back in the kitchen. No, you can do what you want to do, and you surround yourself with people who support you in that. When you become parents, be whatever kind of mum or dad works for you and your family. Don't let other people tell you can't do it like that. Different families work in different ways. And you need to know that little children, my kids, need to see role models of happy, fulfilled adults following their own passions. And finally, be grateful for the opportunities that we have, even when things are challenging. Remember to stop and look around you and look to the future. That's pretty much it. Absolutely. So there's academic advisors here at the university. So if you're not sure if the choices that you're making are the right ones, you can go and you can have meetings with them. There's also counselling services and student support and peer mentoring. So other students here in the campus who are a little bit further along who can support you. So it's not the case that once you're here, you're just left to your own device and it's like the Hunger Games or something. It's not like that. There are people to support you, but the most important thing is that You need to know that you have to be in charge of your own learning. You have to be in charge of getting to class and doing the work and managing it all. People will help you if you go and ask for help, but the other thing is people won't know that you're necessarily struggling unless you go and ask for help as well. So it's a much bigger place, of course. There's many more students than there are in high school. But I know that students who come from schools where you're already encouraged to be independent are going to do really well when you get to university. I worked out because in that first year of university, when I was doing English, which I had to do for the journalism degree, I also did psychology. I chose psychology and I just loved the lectures. And as I said, I was working in an RSL club where a lot of people were gambling and I couldn't understand why they would keep losing money. Why would they choose to do that? And I remember sitting in a lecture where they were describing what's called learning theory. And this is a theory about sort of punishments and rewards and why people keep doing things even when they're not very helpful things. And how if you give people a small reward, like a poker machine paying out, how they might keep going. And it just sort of struck me, man, psychology is something that helps me understand the world. And so it was that sort of being in a workplace where I could see real life problems, and then being in a university lecture where I could see the answers to the problems. I thought that's where I want to be. I want to go and follow that direction. So that's why I chose psychology. Absolutely. In my fourth year, which is the honours degree in psychology, so honours in psychology and honours in many of the subjects, you have to do a big research project and you also have to do some courses, and it's really quite intense, and you're learning new things about how to be a researcher. And I remember halfway through that, I went for an interview to join the army. I went to the army recruiting office down in Sydney and I said, I think I want to come and join the psychology corps in the army because they employ psychologists and they to help assist people who are in the army. So I actually went for an interview. I thought I'm going to give up this honours because it's so hard and I'm really finding it a struggle. So I'll go and do that. And I think it was the fact that you'd have to wear green, and green doesn't really suit me. I wear navy. That probably turned me off the army idea. So I don't know. I think it was then talking to other friends and sharing the fact that I'm finding this a struggle. So just like the student asked before, who's around to support you? And I was talking to my peers and going and talking to my supervisor and asking for the help that I needed. As it turned out, one of the reasons why I was feeling really overwhelmed is that I was still working in that RSL club. I was doing 4 night shifts a week. Plus I was trying to do my honours degree, and it was just so much. So my supervisor offered me a part-time research job so I could give up that nighttime work. So yeah, it was looking around for solutions, and there's people here that will help you with solutions. Not so much. In undergraduate, in the English course that I did, there was a lot of reading, and that's why I've sort of suggested that if you're a reader now in high school, that it really pays off later. When I really loved the subjects, I didn't find the workload difficult. So in second year, I majored in psychology, so I started doing more psychology subjects, and in third year. And so no, I found the workload manageable because I really, really loved it. So once I chose the thing that was easier, the workload wasn't too bad. You had to be consistent, and I'm a memory researcher, so I know from memory research that it's really ineffective to cram for exams right before the exam. So you have to be somebody who is quite organised, and you're preparing for your exams and you're studying over time. But once I sort of had those strategies, it was quite manageable. It was okay. One solution is to have a job where you can kind of do all those multiple things. So remember I told you originally I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be a journalist. Well, I'm an academic now, but I do some teaching. So I teach undergraduate students and postgraduate students. I get to do some lectures with them. I also do some journalism kind of things. I do things on the radio, I occasionally do TV things, or I write for newspapers. So you could find a job that lets you do aspects or elements of the thing that you really like. Another way to choose would be, I guess, to try out those different things. Now, I guess it just depends on what kind of training you need for them and how similar they are, or try one first. So here at Macquarie University, we have a lot of students who come back, we call them mature age students, who might have tried one career path and then they've decided, no, I think I'd really be passionate about this other thing. And they go back and try something else and they do a second degree or they retrain in another area. And I think that's fine too. So there's a couple of different ways you could try all the different things that you might like. Thanks, everyone.